There's a passage in the book of Exodus, in chapter 3, where Moses runs into the burning bush. This is really God made manifest to him there physically. And God tells him that he has heard the cries of his people, Israel, in Egypt, and that he's going to use Moses as his chosen instrument to bring them out of bondage. And so Moses does what Moses does, and he starts throwing up roadblocks to this whole process. Oh, I can't, or somebody else. And in the process of that interaction, he actually basically kind of questions who God is. He asks him, whose authority are the people going to pay attention to? And God answers. It's probably something that you've heard before, but he says, I am who I am. It's a pretty declarative statement, isn't it? It's kind of a take it or leave it type thing. This is who I am. And yet, I ran across something actually this week, just reading some commentary. It's a different translation. And the translation, rather than I am who I am, was I will be who I will be. Now that's just a very small change. And yet when you think about it, instead of being something that's static, it's really dynamic in nature. I will be who I will be. It reminds me of a parent or a teacher who takes the teachable moment, who shifts and reveals bits and pieces as the child needs in order to understand aspects of what's going on. And you see this made manifest throughout the rest of Scripture. God talks about himself as a nursing mother. He talks about himself as a bird we're going to gather underneath his wings, as the Lion of the tribe of Judah, as the healer, as Rapha, the rescuer. All kinds of different names for himself that make clear to us some aspect of who God is. Then you see it again in the New Testament, where Jesus talks about himself as the living water. He talks about how he's the gate, he's the vine, that we're the branches there in that illustration. But one of the ones that really stands out to me is when Jesus talks about himself as the bread. He says that he's the bread of life. And it's an ordinary thing. It's something that we see all the time. During that time period, people would have seen them making bread. That's not something that we do a whole lot now. But it was very, very clear that God was in the everyday. That really matters a lot to me when I stop and I think about communion. That God doesn't just make himself known in something that we do every once in a while. This is just on special occasions. No, this is something that we eat, something that we see every day. Every time you pick up your peanut butter and jelly, you're reminded again of God and his provision, that God sustains, that God fulfills, that God gives us life. So as we start our communion service here, coming up in this next week, keep that in mind. Not just when you have your crackers and your flatbread, but also when you're eating just your garlic bread from day to day. You can remember something about God and his provision and the way that he interacts with us. He will be who he will be. He will be who you need.